Brothers and sisters, we will now be starting the program inside the Gents Hall, inshallah. So we can request all the brothers from the community and the sisters who are interested in listening to the question answer session about Islamic wills with Brother Abdul Rahman Zini and Sayyid Hassan Rizvi to please come inside in the Gents Hall. Jazakallah khair. Brothers and sisters, we'll be now starting the session with Brother Abdul Rahman Zini and Sayyid Hassan Rizvi regarding Islamic wills inside the Gents Hall. So if all ladies and gents can proceed into the Gents Hall, the seating for the ladies will be on the right and the seating for the gents will be on the left. Inshallah, we'll be starting very soon. Jazakallah khairan. Brothers and sisters, inshallah, we will be starting the question and answer session regarding Islamic wills inside the gents hall. We're requesting all sisters and gents to please come into the gents hall. There's seating on the right hand side for the ladies and seating on the left hand side for the gents. This very important session about preparing for the hereafter. Inshallah, we'll be starting momentarily with some interesting questions. Please continue to send your questions through Slido. It's at slido.com, and the code is #HICORL. We'll be starting momentarily, so we'd request all the ladies and gents to please proceed into the gents hall. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all for attending this question and answer session, for those who are online and attending with us here today. Our community has had a lot of unprecedented change in the last 2 years. Specifically this summer, we had an unusual circumstance of 3 funerals in a week, which has probably forced a lot of us to think about death in a very different manner. In light of this, we are having this program tonight to sort of make the necessary preparations, and are blessed with 2 our esteemed speakers here today, Sayyid Hassan Rizvi and Brother Abdul Rahman Zini. For those who don't know Brother Abdul Rahman Zini, he is a practicing lawyer here in the Orlando community. A little bit on his background: he owns his own law firm, Zini Law Firm. His educational background: he has a doctorate's degree from Florida Atlantic Metropolitan University Law School after completing his undergrad at the University of Florida. He is a member of the Florida Bar and the Orange County Bar Association. He practices in areas include real estate, corporate law, Chapter 7 consumer bankruptcy law. His practices emphasize representation of business organizations and professionals. His focus is to provide his clients with prompt and practical advice on a cost-effective basis so as to facilitate their business interests and resolve problems at an early stage. Brother Rahman Zini is also a real estate broker, and some of the other areas that he practices include business, immigration and nationality law, mediation, real estate, wills, trusts, and estates. He speaks both English and Arabic. So without any further delay, Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat.
Okay. So I think with your permission, we'll just jump right to some of the questions that are there.
Sure.
Okay. So the first one that's up there: how are joint spousal assets supposed to be handled according to the Sharia if one of the spouses dies? Do they belong to the surviving spouse, or is it 50%? Or is 50% of it distributed to the deceased spouse's heirs, or is the entire asset subject to the deceased person's will, even though it was co-owned? Just this question alone, hopefully, will get us to understand why handling this stuff now is important, because this is a mess. And this is a common issue that takes place, because people have, again, correct me anytime I make a mistake, people have an automatic assumption that assets will just magically just go to kids or go to the spouse, and it doesn't, as far as I know, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't just magically transfer to anybody. The government can, where it need be, decide where it goes. So don't just think that your assets are magically just going to travel to your spouse or to your kids like that. It doesn't work. In this situation, if you have a specific need in mind, so let's just say, for example, you and your spouse jointly own the house, right? Now, one of you dies. Now that 50%, because you haven't specifically designated it to do anything, if you don't write any wills, then pretty much
It goes to the spouse.
it's going to go to the spouse, right?
Yes.
Now, in this situation, imagine you didn't want that to be the case. Imagine you actually wanted it to be like, okay, you know what? My half that I jointly had, like, whatever, well, I'm speaking to the guys here. There's 2 women there, but it's okay. So your half, you wanted to actually be split to maybe some of your kids as well. And you could have had that right if you had edited your will before that. So you have the right to adjust it as you want. Like I said, remember, there's the legal part of it that you would have to adjust, and the Shar'i part you have to adjust to. So there's a few different ways you can do this. So one of them is, depending on when, if the asset, well, again, let's stick with the house. If the house is in both of your names, then that 50% is going to be split according to the Sharia, right? If you don't do anything. Now, that's the Shari'i rules. Again, I'm not talking about the legal stuff, because the government can jump and do whatever they want if you haven't gotten your legal stuff settled. So it's going to be split that way. So if you wanted everything to go to your spouse, then the government seems like they would do that on their own, right? So if that's what you wanted, then technically you don't have to write that, but again, it still might be better, especially if your kids are expecting that maybe they might get something. They should know this stuff ahead of time. Now, the taxation stuff, I don't want to get into too, because there may be some tax stuff involved. What I've seen some other people do as well, again, I don't want to talk about all this tax stuff because that's a separate discussion. Some people, they will end up, see, I don't know how many like fiqh details I want to really mention over here. what some people will do in order to avoid certain issues is that they will end up gifting something during their lifetime, or they'll gift something after, or I can't really gift it afterwards, or they'll use that 1/3 right that they have and distribute it after the fact. Again, I know some of these questions that may come out will be very specific. Oh, what do I do here, here, here? The general answer is going to be this. If you have a specific idea in mind, you need to make sure that it's mentioned specifically, and then if you're going to employ a lawyer, then you need to make sure that they understand exactly what you want. There are going to be certain times where, at least in this case, the Sharia and what you want might be in line, maybe. But there's going to be, looks like the majority of the time it may not be the case, right? So we have to be very, very careful there. So let me just recap in terms of what the Sharia would say here. 50%, if you have any asset, that 50% is going to be distributed as the Sharia dictates. Now again, just to make sure we're on the same page. 2/3, you have no right over. So what's going to happen as a person dies, it comes to the Sharia, all your sort of wajib things need to be taken care of. If you have any debts, it's going to come out from there. Again, the Sharia, I'm not talking about the law, the Sharia, right? The law doesn't care if you have some debt to somebody in the community if it hasn't been done properly, right? If nobody else knows about it. So your Shar'i debts need to be paid properly. You have the wajib burial rights, they have to be paid as well from that initial amount. Now you've got left over, there's this 3/3. 2/3, Islam has already said how that stuff's going to be going to your inheritors. You don't get to decide who inherits. Inheritance is already there. In our fiqh books, you have two different books. You have the book of wills and the book of inheritance. Inheritance, it's just saying, okay, if these people are alive, this is how much they get. That's all stuff that's already been laid out, and you can find those in the fiqh books. Will is where you come in and say, I want specific things done where I have the right. So I mentioned some of the things. You want somebody to specifically lead your salah, salatul janazah, you have to mention that. You want somebody to execute your will, you have to write that down. If you want, I don't know, a specific food to be served at your janazah, some people, they have these things in mind. You want majalis to be done on your behalf, these things need to be mentioned specifically. Again, otherwise your kids or somebody else is going to come in the middle and they might mess things up for you. So these are the things you want to use. That 1/3 right you have, you can use, and now that can be spent out. So that 1/3, you can say, look, I have qada salah, I want to use that money to pay for my qada salah. Or I didn't get a chance to go on hajj, so use that money to pay somebody to go on hajj, something like that. You can give it to the center. You can give it a sadaqah. You get that 1/3 to decide. And I gave you other examples. If you want all that to go to your spouse that remains, you can do that. You want it to go to one of your kids. Whatever you want, that 1/3 is up to you to decide. Assuming that there's going to be actually something left over. Because maybe after all your debts are settled, you've got nothing left over. So whoever has asked that question, hopefully it makes sense. And I hope what you took away from that is make sure you get a will, right? Okay. Let's see. How do you balance, you know what, let me go to one that would make sense for you. Okay. How do you make changes to an existing will?
Okay, so there's different ways. One is you can just start from scratch and the new will overtake or get rid of the old one. That's the easiest way. If you just want to make a change to something small, there's something called a codicil, which is like an amendment to the will. The problem is if you have multiple codicils and you keep on adding different changes, it can get confusing. So it's easier and better to start from, or to do a whole new will and erase the old will.
Okay, awesome. Before I get to these, actually, this is a question that I have for myself. So, is in Florida, are we required to get a lawyer to write our will? What if I say, look, I got a document typed up, or I recorded some selfie will, and I put it out on Facebook or Instagram, whatever. Like, does that count as a will?
No. So you don't have to have a lawyer write your will. Your will, there's certain requirements that have to be met. The main thing is in the execution of the will, that it has to be in front of two witnesses, and those witnesses have to be disinterested, so it can't be someone who's going to inherit something, or the person that's going to be the personal representative. It has to be two disinterested witnesses, and in order for you not to have to bring the witnesses to court in a probate proceeding, if you do it in front of a notary public and the witnesses are sworn, that will also, it's called a self-proving affidavit, that proves the will, basically. So 2 witnesses and a notary, and then you write whatever you want. There are some things that you can't do, and there's some things that a married couple would need to do in order to avoid the will being invalidated. So like Florida law has something called first of all, you can't disinherit your spouse at all. Or you can't you're not allowed to disinherit your spouse.
Okay.
And if you're going to give your spouse less than 30%, that spouse has to basically waive that right. So, which in the case of the Sharia, I mean, that would probably be needed because 1/8 or 1/4 are both less than 30%. So, and that's one of the reasons why if there's a married couple and they have a trust, that can actually, and you put your assets in the trust, it helps avoid these situations because you're able to you have more leeway in a trust document than you do in a will.
Okay.
So you have a will, the will will have the burial instructions and all these other things. And then it says that I want the provisions of my trust when it comes to distribution to be followed.
Okay, awesome. Let me go to another. I think this one's also it's going to be for you too, right?
Yeah.
How often should a will or estate plan be updated? Are there frequent changes with Florida law that require annual reviews?
So the changes are not frequent. I would say there was a big change in 2014, I believe, to the trust code. And that's why a lot of people are doing trusts now because it's definitely makes life easier. I would say it's not annual. You probably need every 5 years to look at your will again and see what. Just make sure that the people you chose are still there or still available. That because people pass away, people move. So there's those types of changes that might need to be done. So I would say every 5 years is. Yeah.
And then based on what you were saying before as well, in terms of the fact that Florida has a specific amount that they require a spouse to get.
Unless they waive it.
Unless they waive it, right?
Yes.
So, and again, as we're saying that, so for the Shari'i thing, then it pretty much has to be done where you're going to have some proof of it. Otherwise, the wife, or the spouse, I guess, right? We're talking
yes, it could be the husband, yeah.
Yeah, it could be the husband too.
Yeah.
They're going to be getting an amount that Shar'an they shouldn't be getting, right? So that means, in a sense, it almost becomes wajib for us to get involved in this and make sure that we have this stuff done properly because otherwise it's not going to be divided. And again, it would be nice if everybody's trusting at that last moment, but it may not be the case, right? It's probably better if we have that legal documentation. Okay. How do you balance what you discussed? WRT? How do you balance what you discussed with respect to? Thank you.
Okay.
With respect to not having more than you need for your current needs, only with having sufficient savings to help your family get through rainy days, or you not wanting to be a burden on someone else if you reach old age. So I mentioned just a few different things just to give us a different mindset. Look, we have a lot of general principles from the Ahlul-bayt. I'm not telling you all to live like the Ahlul-bayt financially. That's not my point here. Is it again, we know that they're role models, absolutely, but it doesn't mean every single little thing is something that we need to act upon as well. And we see this distinction as well. Even during the times, like Rasulullah lived one way, Imam Ali lived one way, Imam Hassan lived another way. They had different lifestyles. And they even told some of their followers, look, we do this because of our status in the community, because we're the Khalifa or we're the Imam. You don't have to do this, right? So some of the ulama, they mention that as well, that look, when it comes to financial stuff, some people have that position where they can do these things. But most of us are probably not going to be in that position where, again, let's just say, again, maybe I'll give a contemporary example, right? Let's just say you're a day trader, and that's how you survive. It's just day trading. So at the end of every day, right, market closes, and from that day, I'm going to say what an average amount because I don't know who here day trades and what you guys get. Let's just say somebody makes, I don't know, $500 in a day. Was that a good day? I have no idea. I'm not a day trader. I don't know. Sounds like a decent day, right? $500. I don't know, man. $500, right? And now, I'm pretty sure you don't need $500 every day. I think that more than covers your expenses for the day, depending on what your spouse or your kids want from you, right? So, somebody in that position, maybe that's what they do constantly. 100 to 500 every day. So this is a good day for them. So now that person, because they're used to that, maybe for them, they're like, you know what? Give, because my daily amount, maybe I only need to spend on a day $50, right? That's their daily thing. Okay, $50 now, that's my expenditure. 450 now, I'm going to distribute and get rid of right away. So maybe they'll put away, I don't know, a couple hundred for the center. Maybe they have a fund that they're saving, a trust fund maybe for their kids, or maybe a college fund, or they're saving up for their kids to get married. You know, this is a way to do it. So planning for the future is not something that is shunned upon in the Sharia as well. And it's, you know, if I'm not mistaken, there's one narration which, I think it's Salman actually. So some people had found out Salman was saving up money. And some of the companions came and they were basically complaining to Rasulullah. Right? They're like, oh, you know, your favorite guy over here, Salman, this Iranian guy, he's saving money, and you said that we're supposed to be humble and not have money and all this stuff, and this guy's saving. He said, look, why don't you go back and talk to him about this and see why? So they went back to him, I'm paraphrasing obviously, and Salman said, look, I'm securing this today, I'm securing my risk for right now, and at the same time, I'm making sure I'm long-term planning as well, because this is exactly what Allah has wanted. But if Allah doesn't give me something for tomorrow, I'm okay with that as well too. I'm not going to freak out if I don't have something to save tomorrow, but I'm also going to plan for that day as well. Now again, the Ahlul-bayt, they're in a slightly different situation. So we don't want to compare apples to, you know, oranges here in that sense. Some people, let me put it this way. Usually what ulama say is, in every situation, for every individual, they are going to have a specific set of instructions for them. Probably the best example would be like a personal trainer. We might have some general guidelines about healthy eating and healthy living and stuff like that. But using my personal example, maybe keto is not for everybody, right? Maybe some people need to do a slightly different diet, right? So what ulama usually say is, look, there are general things that most of us overspend. We're usually spending beyond our means, especially here, people who are really addicted to spending on things that they don't need. That might be some of our issues. There may be some of us here that are pretty stingy too, that we don't save up anything at all. That we're very, very, you know, stingy, and we're not spending in the right, you know, places. So that can be an issue. So what ulama usually will say is that for every individual, based on their own spiritual issues, they should come to an alim or a local spiritual scholar that they trust, and they will advise them that, look, based on who you are and what your life is, and your long-term plans, your short-term plans, your family environment, all this stuff, maybe you should save or you should not save or do this, do that. There'll be very specific instructions. But look, the overspending thing, we don't want to do that, and we also don't want to be, you know, stingy as well.
Can we ask questions, or we have to type it?
If you're okay, saying it out loud. Yeah.
Sure.
This question is for the attorney.
Yes.
Can you explain to us, to a layman like me, what a trust is?
Sure.
Because, I mean, I'm seeing questions being thrown, but
Yeah.
there's no, you know, some people won't understand what probate means, or
Sure.
what a trust is,
Sure.
the benefits of it, how to go about to form it, what is the cost factor, how the trust operates, is it like an entity, or is it recorded? If you
Yeah.
can explain to us in a
Sure.
nutshell.
So a trust is basically, it's an agreement between a settlor or a grantor, a person who is creating the trust, and a trustee. When it comes to this type of trust, usually you're the trustee. So it's an agreement between you and yourself that I'm putting these properties and these accounts into this trust to be distributed to the beneficiaries. Now, in the beginning, you're the trustee, the settlor, and the beneficiary of the trust. You're allowed to do whatever you want with it. It is its own separate entity. It doesn't have to be recorded or anything like that, but it is an entity. Things can be titled in the name of the trust. Once the trust is formed, you can deed property into that trust, and in the trust you designate who is going to be the initial trustees and then the successor trustees if the initial trustees pass away. So once the initial trustee passes away, the successor trustee takes over the trust, and then there's usually provisions that what is going to happen upon my death. And upon my death, I want you to sell the properties and distribute according to so-and-so, according to the Sharia, or I want 1/3 to go to this charity and the rest to be, the 2/3 to be distributed, etc. Timeline, it basically, It doesn't take long to create a trust. It's just coming up with the agreement, the form of it. It just needs to be kept in a safe place. And if you're going to sell your property during your life, you just have to provide that trust agreement to the title company or to the bank, and once they see the agreement and sees that you're the trustee and that you have the power to do so, you're able to act upon it. And then the cost, it really depends on how complicated it is. As I had shown before, most of the time you're looking at around $2,000, $2,500 to create a trust.
Does one still need a will with the trust?
You do have a will as well, and the will have those other provisions that the Imam was talking about, what you want to do as your burial, etc. And we do what's called a pour-over will, just in case you forgot to put something into the trust, then anything else would pour over to the trust, would go over into the trust.
How do you avoid probate? Sorry.
Yes.
No, it's okay.
How do you avoid probate?
Yes, to avoid probate.
Sorry,
Yeah.
because
Sure.
not everybody can hear him. And on the mics, can you just repeat what he's saying, if you don't mind?
So he's saying, how do you avoid probate? By having a trust and the property already in the trust, and let's say you have a retirement account, you designate the trust as the beneficiary, so everything automatically goes into the trust. The trust agreement and the successor trustee will be able to handle or manage the property without having to go through probate. That's how you avoid it. And probate is the court process that you have to go through in order to effectuate a will, if that's all you have. Okay?
Good.
I have a question. Before you go to those, and just to clarify on the Sharia part.
Sure.
So there is certain, obviously there are certain amounts or fractions that you can give to the spouse and your daughter and the son. Those numbers are different, right, according to Sharia. But that's when the will is executed after your death. Do those rules only affect you after your death, or do those rules also, let's say at the age of 60, I now want to distribute to my children and my wife the wealth that is there.
Okay.
Do I still have to follow those particular rules?
Got it. Okay. So just to repeat, so you hit 60, you have wealth, it's your wealth, you can dispose of it however you see fit, right? So basically you're just giving out gifts then, right? You can do it, it's your money, paid your khums and all that stuff, yeah, then you do whatever you want with it. Now, upon death, that's when the rules of inheritance then come there and say, look, those 2/3, the way that Allah has designated, that's it, it's done. So again, if you had that, one kid you didn't really like so much or whatever, well, they're going to get all that much, right? Or again, depending on how, whatever sort of tiers are alive, right? Depending on how things break down. Then, sometimes the way that it breaks down, again, I don't like to put it like this, but that's just somehow certain families are like that, where you know that there are certain members of a family that they don't need that extra money. But after you die, it's going to end up going to them. And they're the type that won't, out of fairness, distribute it back to everybody else who needs it within the family, meaning the other siblings or if their mother or father is still alive, right? Unfortunately, this does happen. I've seen this with, again, I'm generalizing here, but I've seen this a few times. Wealthy individuals, they inherit from their mother or father, and their other siblings are not doing so well. And they knew, generally, without it being written down, that their mother and father would want that money to have been distributed properly back to their kids, because they know that, I'm doing well. And they wouldn't do it. He said, I know better to do this. I can invest this money. I'll do much better with it. You can't touch it. And it gets really messy. And again, sometimes this happens because you have, let's say, one son, many daughters, things like this. Or if there's no kids or kids are overseas. There's so many different, issues that we don't end up, thinking about. And yeah. So remember also that if you're going to gift it or give it out while you're alive, if you're in the taqlid of Ayatul Sistani, then you're going to have to pay khums on it, right? Because Ayatul Sistani says when you give a gift, that's khumsable. Not every madja has that ruling, but Ayatul Sistani does, yeah.
So that stands for cash, property,
Bitcoin, whatever you want to give.
Any asset. Yeah, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you want to gift. If you're gifting something, according to Ahlul-bayt, that gift is khumsable, right? Inheritance, though, is not. So that's why sometimes people will not gift it because of the idea of khums, right? So if somebody gifts somebody, right, you gift your spouse something, khums is liable on it. If they inherit it, there is no khums on that. Let me give another example too. I know, numbers are running. It's good. Do that. No. We want to make sure that our families are taken care of. It's obvious. We don't want Sam Chachu to come and take away our money, right? Uncle Sam, that's what I'm talking about. You don't want him to take away that money. It doesn't belong to them. We know what they do with the money. You don't want them to have that money. You want to be able to have, as Allah says, I want you to have say in this money and how it's dispersed. That's why I give these narrations. We have a right, we have a responsibility. We know who within our family, within our inheritors, within our extended family, who should be getting this stuff. So we should use that right that Allah has given us. Whether it's while we're alive and we're distributing it at that point, or writing it out in our will and distributing it, or using our sort of 1/3 right that we have in that sense.
So now the question is that if you move all this stuff to a trust,
Okay?
is that 20% home still valid?
Oh boy. If you move the stuff to a trust.
So basically,
Yeah.
before your death,
Yeah.
you're moving everything to the trust.
Okay?
Right? And obviously, that is distribution of wealth, really, if you think about it. Because in the trust, it will mention as to who gets what, right?
Yeah, upon your
You're
death.
distributing that wealth in the trust.
You said so, yeah, you're setting aside money, but it's not going to anybody yet.
It's
It
still
hasn't been
yours.
distributed.
Yeah, it's still yours, and you're
So it's still yours.
So if the distribution is done after you die, that's okay.
That's inheritance then.
You can tell them that, okay, I'm gifting you this, but you're not going to get it until I die.
Which is basically then it's inheritance, right? Because what you're saying is this, like, look, I've got 1/3 inheritance, right? I have 1/3 of my leftover wealth. This is what has been written down. Again, you have it clearly written in your trust. So now after that person dies, when they get that, it's khums free, right? Whether that's property, whatever it is. Now, after the 1 year, then that's a whole different story, right? Because we know that that person's, I have to mention this as well, just because now you are calculating, let me make sure you take the calculations all the way, right? Let's just say there's an investment property or something. You pass that on, it goes to the inheritance, right? Maybe you put that in the trust, now it comes, it's split amongst your kids. They sit on that house for a year. So when it was inheritance, khums free, you're good to go. 1 year is done, okay, then now that's assets that they have, that's khumsable, because now that's stuff that they held on to. If it's appreciated, again, I don't want to make this into a khum session, because then we're going to go off on all these tangents and stuff like that, right? All I'm saying is, that's why I'm telling you all, think about it ahead of time. You need to do the numbers and work out stuff so that you basically maximize how much your kids are going to get. Again, I've seen the same thing happen as well, where people are sitting down, they're waiting, and they end up paying khums when they didn't need to do it in the first place, right? When it could have been set up where it was a inheritance, which again, basically saying it's a gift after I'm dying, basically, in that sense, which is fine because they're waiting for that. And because they had done that, they didn't have to pay any khums on it, and they waited after their parent or whatever, or spouse had died, then they sold the property, and they were able to use that fully, right, without having to pay khums on it. And there are some people who did it beforehand for whatever reason, and then they ended up paying the khums on it, and it became, sort of a whole issue. Again, there's nothing wrong with paying khums, but you don't have to do it unnecessarily in that sense. If they don't need it right now, there's no point. Allah has already made enough of these rules easy enough for us, if we learn them the right way. Again, sometimes it gets overcomplicated, I know. Even myself, it kind of spins my head sometimes. That's why usually I leave it to like Mulana Rizvi. I'm like, look, he's written enough books and stuff like that, let him handle all these things. But there are ways where we can work within the Sharia, where we can, in a sense, maximize the amount that we get, which is useful for projects that we have going on here, whether it's our family or other things that we need in our lifetime. Hope that makes sense, yeah? Yeah. Sure.
What about in terms of going back to the will?
Yeah.
Do we have like a template where it has
Huh.
the Florida law as well as
Oh.
the Sharia piece in it?
Have you seen anything like that? I don't think it can't be done in that sense. The only way that, based on what I understood, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this trust has to be set up then. That would be the only way to do it properly, right?
Yeah, I mean,
For married couples.
for married couples, I mean, you can still do it by will, and the husband or wife can waive that elective share as well.
Okay.
There's also other issues with the joint property as well, that if you don't have it in a trust, then the joint property actually passes outside of of probate. So it actually doesn't go through the probate if husband and wife own a house and one passes away, automatically by law it goes to the other spouse. So unless they have it in a trust and the trust says no, the 50% would go to my heirs.
Yeah. Okay.
So
What happens if both, unfortunately, both the husband and the wife pass away?
at the same time,
Yeah.
So he's asking, what if both parents pass away?
if both, then it would go to, usually 50% would go to the husband's heirs, 50% would go to the wife's heirs if it was joint, if it was joint ownership.
So
Yeah.
that's even distribution among the kids then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, again, a Shari'i issue, right? If there's...
If they don't have a will.
If they don't have a will, then it would go, if they don't have a will, it goes by Florida law, which would be the intestacy. I mean, it can get very complicated, but generally it goes to the children only. So the parents don't get anything, which is, yep.
Mawlana, don't you feel that this Islamic law
Yeah.
of inheritance was designed when someone passes away and they don't have a will, and then the estate gets distributed, let's say 1/3, this, whatever, to the daughter or son, I'm not sure whatever
Sure,
the
yeah.
percentage is. That's, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the gist of this law
What's the
is.
thought behind it?
You know, what's the thought behind it? Because if I'm alive,
Yeah.
okay, I should have the freedom to, put my assets to whichever way I want. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a daughter that's, not competent to handle the asset, or a son I wouldn't want to give to him, But if I die and I don't have a will or anything, that's how I feel that maybe this Islamic law came into place, where, okay, there is no will, so Islamically, how do we do it? We distribute the asset according to that. I don't know, this is just...
No, it's a good thought.
According to Islamic history,
Ji.
I'm not an expert. You're probably
I'm not one either, don't worry.
You're more of an expert than I am. But when this Sharia law, when this law came in, a lot of the inheritance at that time was, I would say probably 99.9% was being given to the male.
Yeah.
The oldest
Well, not
son.
99, I mean, so the questions, sorry, for those who are watching online. So the questions are about the sort of wisdom and the thought process, the historical nature of inheritance laws, right? Like, again, or to put it in very modern terms, patriarchal stuff, right? That's what it seems like. It seems male-dominated. So these same questions are exactly what most of the companions asked too. They said the same thing. They asked they asked Rasulullah, they asked the 5th Imam, they asked the 8th Imam, they asked all the Imams that said, look, at least at that time, they said, look, men are the ones who are out there doing all this stuff. Well, they're getting all this money. The women are the ones who are not going out. Why are they getting less? So that was their thinking too, in that sense. So they said, look, if you're going to look at this stuff, you need to look at Islam holistically, completely, right? So right now, for all the fathers, the husbands who are here, whose job is it wajib to take care of the family? The man. Nafaqah, you have to pay for everything. Shelter, it's on you. Transportation, on you. Clothing, on you. Food, on you. Everything is on you. What does a woman have to pay for? Nothing. Never once in her life is there any financial obligations at all, ever. Never. So now think of just any sort of situation. You have one son, one daughter, right? That son, so you're obviously, as a father, you're responsible for both of them. Now, when you die, most of that money, right, will go to the son, and a small part of it will now go to the daughter. That son, if he gets married, what is he going to do with that money? He has to use it to take care of his family, because it's going to be wajib on him to take care. That daughter, if she gets married, she's got somebody else taking care. So that money is going right in her pocket. That son is probably going to have to spend it on his family. So the way that it's been described in the words of the Ahlul-bayt is that this distribution of wealth is based on the rights and obligations that Allah has designated to both genders as well. Because the rights and obligations of spending is on the man, that's why more is going to go to him. And because there are zero rights and obligations on the woman, they still get something out of it. But it's not as much because they have no rights and obligations to spend anything. There's nothing there. At the same time, that's also why 1/3 is up for you to distribute as you see fit as well. You can do that, and in many situations, the daughters would end up getting more than the son too, depending on how it's distributed, who else is alive. Like that can happen as well too. Now, yeah, if you want to gift it while you're alive, of course you can do that. You can set these stuff aside. That's fine too. That just depends on what you want to do. So I don't know if that answers, it doesn't answer, if there's more questions that follows that. I mean, this is a bigger discussion, obviously. Maybe not for a will inheritance seminar in that sense, but I understand the thought process. Look, in the modern age too, that's why a lot of siblings will make sure that they sit down ahead of time. All of them will sit there and talk to you. Look, based on our economic situations, hey, maybe the daughter is sitting there on Wall Street. She's doing really well. And the son, I don't know, right? He's doing something else and maybe paycheck to paycheck. So there they sit down and say, look, let's write it down right now that you will give up your right to inheritance and give it to your son. And you can write these things down, and that's how it'll be enforced. And you can do that stuff. It's fine too. The reason that the Shari'i obligations are there too is because, look, this is the normal bare minimum situation that most people are going to be in, especially in an Islamic society. Even over here, generally speaking, that's still going to be the case. Now, can a woman go out and work and provide? Yeah, that's her choice. Does she have to do it? No. She can say, I can go, if I want to go out and work, I can do that, and I can keep every single dollar in my pocket, and I can have a separate account and not even tell you about it. They have that right. But a man can't do that. They have to go and make sure that they spend and provide and do all this stuff too, right? So you ask the question, it's making it worse for you guys. I don't know why you ask these things, so now you're going to have to pay up more. But, okay.
I have a follow-up question, but I think he's getting bored now.
Let's see.
Hussein has a question.
Yeah, there's a lot on Slido too, so I don't know what I want to do. Let me jump to this. So this one goes back to somebody asking about, I mean, I think we hit most of the stuff about what's involved in Sadiq but trust. I think you said
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Do both the husband and wife need to be present when it's there? Timeline, the expenses, I think you mentioned it could be a few grand.
Yes. So again, every situation is different. Some spouses actually do have separate assets, and they do the wife and everything. Nothing is joint. In that case, each one would have to have their own trust. If they do own everything jointly and want to continue to do that, they would have to do a joint trust, and both couples, both husband and wife would have to be present and would have to agree to it.
Awesome. This other one as well. Let's do this. What is the process for estate distribution after one's death?
Okay, so if it's just a will, the process is that the will has to be presented, it has to be given to the court, it has to be proven that this is this person's will, and then it's a long process of probate. You have to send out a notice to creditors. You have to publish in a newspaper. You have to wait for creditors to come. There's different types of administration depending on how much you have. There's summary administration if your estate is less than $75,000. If it's more than $75,000, you have to do something called formal administration. And it goes through court, and then if you have a will, the court will appoint the personal representative, and the personal representative that you appointed in your will take care of distributing the assets and taking care of that.
But sorry, I want to jump to you, Hussein. Let me do this one quickly as well. Does Islam mandate an amount that must go to somebody in the will? Again, the will is completely up to you, right? You get to decide all that stuff with the 1/3 that you have left over, right? So 1/3, it's up to you. Those other 2/3 that you can't touch, that's inheritance. That's not up for you to decide, right? That's why he said there's two different things. There's inheritance that Allah has decided based on which of your inheritors are alive and your leftover assets, all that. That's distributed by the Sharia. 1/3, that's what you end up writing in your will.
But because we live in a non-Muslim country, your will is going to talk about those 2/3 as well, and it's going to designate those 2/3 because otherwise they won't know what you're.
Yeah, and then they're going to end up messing it up. Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So you do designate the Sharia 2/3 and then what you want to do with the 1/3 in it.
Actually, as a follow-up, is it enough, let's just say somebody, without mentioning the specifics, like, okay, if this person's alive, then this. Can they just say, I want this, whatever, the trust or the distribution to happen according to, for example, Shia Islamic law, and then the court on their own, will they go and find out, okay, let's get somebody locally who knows these things and they'll distribute
So
it?
if you have a trust, you can do that. You tell the trustee to consult the local imam and etc.
Okay.
However, with a will, if you don't designate, it becomes very, very complicated. The court will have to take testimony upon, and it could get messy.
It's a mess. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Hussein, sorry.
So we just get a better understanding of a trust. When property or funds are allocated in a trust, and if that person is still living, he still has access to that property and funds to use during his lifetime, even though it's allocated to a trust.
Yes. So,
Could you just repeat
so
it?
the question was, does the person, when they put their property into a trust, do they still have access to it? Yes. It's still, for all intents and purposes, yours. It's really just an estate planning vehicle that simplifies things after you pass away, but you could spend the entire trust out and leave it empty before you pass away. And then it would be, there'd be nothing to distribute at that point, because you're the initial beneficiary of that trust. Okay?
Awesome. Okay. Does everyone have to go through a court if you have a simple Islamic will? For example, if I have an Islamic will left behind for my family, why would a court get involved? I think we may have answered this, but
so if the property is not, if the property is titled, like a bank account or like real estate, etc., anything that's titled, even retirement account, unless you designate beneficiaries, and you designate the beneficiaries, or you have, or for real estate that you, for real estate, it really will have to go through the court in order to effectuate it, because a will is not going to self-execute. It has to be probated in order for the property title to change, because it's not going to change automatically. So if I own a property and I pass away and I didn't have a trust and it was just me, how are they going to know who my heirs are, etc.? It goes through the probate. And that will, that Islamic will that you left behind, goes to probate court, and the personal representative follows that will and has to go through all of that.
So again, if they go through that whole process of getting it notarized and all those things.
It still would go through probate.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
That's if there's no beneficiaries designated. Yeah, so there's ways you can do if you title, if you make, for instance, if you designate on your bank account transfer on death, on my death, I want my bank account to go 1/2 to this person and 1/4 to this person. It would go automatically outside of any probate or anything like that.
Okay.
How does life insurance proceeds be treated? Is it part of someone's own estate? Is that something where Islamic law comes in and says, oh, you have a life insurance for, let's say, $1,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
1/3 has to go this way, or it can, how is that treated?
So if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to remember how life insurance, have you dealt with the question before about life insurance?
In our fiqh, a lot of people say it's not it's not even allowed to have life insurance, and so
Okay.
there's, yeah.
So I know Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi has answered this question before. I just watched his lecture today too. It is a different category than everything else.
Yeah, because it's not something that you own during your life, and usually you designate the beneficiaries of the life insurance.
Yeah.
It's something that comes later.
Let me double check. I don't want to give a false answer. Yeah, let me get the right answer, and then I'll get back to you, inshallah. Yeah. How does a person's will and inheritance come to light after their death? How should a will or a trust be stored for proper execution?
So you should put it in a safe place and tell the personal representative where it is, or the trustee where it is, or give them a copy of it. But for a will has to be an original copy in order for it to actually go through probate. The trust, you just let that trustee know where it is, or send them a copy for proper execution.
Under the pillow is okay, right?
Yes, under the pillow, yeah.
Okay, I think we got 2 more, and then, unless nothing else comes in, then I think we should wrap up then. Okay. What are some typical questions that should be discussed between a couple prior to seeing an attorney for estate planning trusts? Is there a checklist per se?
So definitely there's that awkward conversation of whose property, if property is joint, how much is this person's and how much is that person's. And I've seen, like I said, it's a lot of people think that the husband is always the richer party. I've definitely seen where the wife has way more than the husband, and we have that awkward conversation where, maybe we should designate whose is what.
Oh boy.
And separate things that way, because this concept of tenancy or by the entirety, where each party owns the 100%, is a foreign concept, I think, to the Sharia, where I own 100%, my wife owns 100%. We both own the entire. So designating what is the wife's, what is the husband's, because it's not necessarily 50-50. It might be different.
Yeah. Depending on if, let's say, they both put in different amounts, right, to buy the property and stuff like that.
Or in the bank account.
Yeah. Oh, man. I do not want to be in that room. Okay, last one. Do retirement accounts or life insurance benefits belong to the surviving spouse automatically, or would the spouse need to waive rights to that as well, so they are handled according to the inheritance rules? It's like a mix of both, right?
Yeah, so life insurance, again, that's
Yeah.
a separate matter. Retirement accounts are you designate beneficiaries, and usually people designate their spouse as the beneficiary because there are tax benefits to doing that. But the retirement is actually your savings that you put aside. So it is, according to what I've dealt with in the past, it is subject to Islamic inheritance rules.
Yeah. And usually this is why, if they discuss it and have it set out beforehand with their inheritors, like usually with their kids, that look, this is how the stuff is going to be distributed, then it makes things much less messy, right?
Yeah.
In that sense.
So in my situation, the thing is, we're always talking about kids. A lot of times people forget about the parents because parents get 1/6 each. And that's where joint property becomes confusing, because if we're just a married couple and there's 4 parents usually, and and then the kids are shared. So the kids we're not having any problem with, but it's the parents. What happens if I die first? Will my 50% go to the parents, etc.?
Yeah. To get them involved then, and
Exactly.
make sure, like, hey, your grandkids deserve this now. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the life insurance question, I'll get back to everybody. Maybe I'll mention it, if not tomorrow night, then I'll save it for Thursday, inshallah. But I think, yeah, actually it's 11:30 on the dot. So I think with your permission, I think let's wrap up. It's okay. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope, I know you mentioned the amount before, but I think we can get a Groupon going or something like that for estate planning,
we'll help,
right?
yeah.
Yeah?
Inshallah, we can
We'll
work
talk
something
later
out.
about that, inshallah.
Yes,
but,
inshallah.
I hope that this was beneficial for people to at least hear some of these ideas out. And again, I'm going to say it again because I think this is the main takeaway, is you wait too long, it's going to come back and bite somebody, right? And then when it bites somebody, that same person who gets bitten is going to go and bite everybody else. And you're going to have a bunch of hungry people in the family just biting and going after one another. I forgot to mention this too. So there are a few different resources. I don't know if it's viewable, or I don't know if you can expand it. So basically, there's a few recommendations for those who want to go and see templates or get a general idea. So most of you know Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi has done work on this constantly for many, many years. So now again, this is designed for Canada, but at the same time, you can have a general template for yourself. And then, again, if you want to use a lawyer, then obviously use a lawyer to make sure everything's okay, or set up the estate based on the stuff that you've listed out. It's templates that they've created, so you can list out all the different assets that you have, how you want to disperse your 1/3, all those things are meant there. So there's 2 different sources. This one, I believe, yeah, this is the one that Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi has designed with this, I think, Al-Ma'arif Foundation. Yeah, so it's al-m.ca/will, and maybe we'll have them throw it in the weekly or something. In addition, Ahsan, thank you. There's another website as well. It's a World Federation built. They have their own template that they've designed too. Again, these are general templates. Don't think you can, as I think we've said, don't print it out and say, it's under my pillow, that's it. We've said that it probably won't work in the majority of situations. So you need to make sure that it's checked out. Again, hopefully we get that nice Muslim discount that we need, and inshallah our akhiras and the future of our families will be secure there. So this one, what is it? I forgot. If you can just scroll up to the address so people can at least see it. But again, maybe we'll share it in the weekly as well. Yeah. So they have all the rulings and stuff for those who want to check it out. Can you just go and check out the actual URL so people can take a look?
Looks like it's in Britain.
Is it? That's it? Yeah. I mean, look, if you Google Shia wills, you're either going to get this or you're going to get something about Shia LaBeouf. You're only going to get two. There's only two kind of hits that you get. That's pretty much it. So you'll find there. But again, maybe we'll tell the MC to throw it in the weekly so that everybody can grab it there. The other thing too is Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi has I think it's a 2+ hour lecture series where he goes through a lot of these things, including the life insurance one. But again, for those who probably won't watch it, I'll go and I'll grab that specific one and I'll mention it in one of the future lectures, inshallah. But he goes through a lot of the things. He goes through some specific situations on if this person's living, this person dies, what's going to happen. For those who are interested, watch that lecture. He has a book as well that's available, so it might be helpful for you. Now, he spent a lot of time on this, and I've told you guys before. Legal rulings are not my forte, but the general points, inshallah, if you need me to research for you, I can do that, or I can consult with Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi as well. So again, hopefully this was beneficial. For me, this was beneficial to hear all these points from Brother Abdul Rahman. So thank you all for attending, asking your questions, and participating. وأن والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.